Welcome to the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's not just for contracting officers. If you work anywhere in the GovCon world, this podcast is for you. This episode is part 3 of a series about the first 4 things you should do when you receive an RFP. We started this way back in episode 165 with an overview of all the steps. Episode 176 was about reading the RFP. Episode 196 is about the proposal schedule. Today, Kevin is talking step 3, the kickoff meeting, with regular guest and Skyway team member, Vicki Strycharske. Here we go.
One of our customers has decided to go after an opportunity. So the proposal is imminent. We help them target the opportunity. We help them shape it. We help them prepare the team for it. Everybody's ready. The experts are all lined up. You got the excitement going. The red team review team is all ready. Our former contracting officers are all ready to roll. And here comes the RFP, right? And so what are the first 4 things that need to be done when we're talking about an RFP hitting the street? And we talked about this in detail in episode 165. You and I did, Vicki. To refresh everybody's memory, the first thing is read the RFP thoroughly. And the second step was prepare the schedule. And we talked about that in the previous episode. And then now, in this one, we're going to talk about the kickoff meeting. And it's based on how much time do we have to actually get this done, right? We get this proposal done. And then the next one we're going to do is going to be the outline. But today's focus is on the proposal kickoff meeting. And so we're going to cover, number 1, why a kickoff meeting is critical. And by the way, government folks, don't jump off because there's a piece for you in this too that I didn't know when I was a contracting officer. And then the second thing is what the agenda looks like and what are the key steps in the overall kickoff meeting. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'd let you talk. Yeah, we'll get there. Before we get to that, I want to stop and say thanks. Thanks this week goes to Ricky Boyd, Tom Burkett, and Olivia Deal at Northstrat Incorporated. Northstrat Inc. provides strategic information technology solutions to U.S. government agencies in the intelligence, defense, and law enforcement arenas. Very cool. I want to thank the Northstrat team for liking and sharing our podcast episodes since the early days of the podcast. But in addition, Northstrat has been a Skyway community member since 2015. And it's the support of members like Northstrat that allow us to continue to produce these podcasts for free week after week. So thank you, Northstrat. Okay, now I get to shut up and it's Vicki's turn to talk here. Okay, so we're back to the kickoff meeting. We get to the kickoff meeting, and this is your space. Proposals are your thing. So explain to us, like, the kickoff meeting is critical because it sets the tone for the overall communication. But like, why does it really matter?
Well, a kickoff meeting can be a couple of different things. It does set the tone for the communications. It sets the tone for how urgently we must move forward on getting the proposal documents together. It can highlight preparation that we wish we had done if we didn't get it done before the kickoff meeting and before the final RFP was issued. And it will identify areas that we still need to add a lot of detail to and look at more closely. So it does begin the process of actually putting together the proposal. And it is very proposal specific. It is unique to each and every proposal.
This is kind of the first opportunity for the team to meet, like, as a team. They may already know each other, but they're meeting as a team. So like, what's happening during that process?
It can be actually the first time that the team is actually sitting down together and meeting each other. So you may have, if that's the case, in the kickoff meeting, you will have introductions of not only individuals who are actually going to be performing the, writing the proposal, managing it, but you will introduce the companies. And what do they bring to the table? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Who are they? And why are they on our team? So you can have a full-scale introductions the first time around, especially if it's one that you have not had some preparatory meetings on. But this is the first time that the final team is together, and you're setting the stage. And how urgent is it? How fast do you have to get things done?
Are we talking through like who's doing what, like who's responsible to make sure which piece of the proposal gets done?
It can involve that as well. Depends on the proposal. If you've had a lot of good preparation because, for instance, the agency issued a draft RFP that included the instructions and the evaluation criteria in addition to the performance work statement and a lot of other things, then you've had lots of time to develop what your approach is going to be, what are your win themes, who's going to be the experts on different pieces of it, and that's why they're on the team to begin with, how much emphasis is going to be given to different pieces of the technical proposal, for instance, and things like that. So, it can include finalization of who are the actual leads for the different pieces of the proposal. Oftentimes, you've already done that. You've especially if you had the opportunity, you knew this opportunity was coming out, and you should have done some of this already before you even get to the kickoff meeting. It's just validating who is going to be doing it and making sure that they're all on board and available and ready to go.
So one of the things that often happens in the kickoff meeting is you have, I think you call them data calls. Like this is the first time you're asking people for data calls. What kind of stuff goes into a data call at this first kickoff meeting?
I usually will ask for, I will issue the first data call during the kickoff meeting, especially with a team of subcontractors. When you've got several that, especially if you're not familiar with them, you're going to need to get some basic information from each one. So I usually issue the data call for, give me your 2-minute elevator pitch, your paragraph that you usually use in your proposals. And I want you to tailor that one. Look at your usual paragraph of, we've been in business since 1945, providing, widgets and basket weaving to the government across the board. Well, if this proposal is to do with widgets and it's not anything to do with basket weaving, strike that out of there and just go ahead and give me something that is specific to this particular kind of effort. So the paragraph on who the company is, make it, informative and good, because we're apt to use it, and cut and paste to introduce the team in the proposal. I usually ask for, okay, give me your logos. We will talk through our file sharing system, whatever we're using. I often use Box if the team doesn't have a file sharing system that everybody's comfortable with. We'll use Box because it's a secure system and you can just upload, and I can give permissions to different people for different folders and things like that. So, I will ask for corporate org charts. If it's a heavy on the key personnel and personnel, our resumes are going to be part of this proposal, like heavy duty on the resumes. Then I would expect to also get your key personnel resumes at least drafted and to me by the end of the week and uploaded so that we can all take a look at them and see where our strengths and weaknesses, and fill in the resumes that are like really ancient history and don't have a lot of real recent info in them. Then we can go back and start scrubbing those. And past performance is another one. Usually I've talked to the prime knows, that they're going to use 2 of the slots. We have 5 slots. We need 3 more past performance references, and we will identify who's going to be providing those. And usually by the end of the week, we want to see, past performance draft as well. So that's kind of the first data call.
So this stuff sounds like it applies to the big proposals, and it does, right? But it doesn't sound like it's stuff that everybody should just skip just because it's a small proposal. So it's not really the dollar value. What's the right way to look at this as far as when a kickoff meeting like this should apply?
I think a kickoff meeting applies no matter what. Even if it's a one person from a company that's got me as the helping to manage the whole proposal. I think having a time certain when we're actually going to get together and say, this is our kickoff meeting, and look at the final RFP together and look at the timeline for the whole proposal, how we're going to get it done in the time that we have before it's actually due. What is the method of submittal for it, whether it's going to be paper? Yes, indeed. We still have paper on a couple of them. Some are emails, some are CDs, some are upload to a particular web portal. So a lot of that will dictate what the end of the proposal cycle is going to look like. How big is the proposal? And sometimes a very small proposal can be just as tough to write as a large proposal. You have to take a 10-pound sack of sugar and wedge it down into a 2-pound little container and tell the government everything that you want to tell them in a very, very short amount of space. A kickoff meeting sets expectations for who is going to be involved in doing and writing and managing and submitting the proposal.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great point. Is that this isn't a size related issue. This should be something that we put into our flow regardless of the size of the opportunity, because you're right. If you don't have this, then you don't really have a starting point. And everybody's just working, but they don't really have as much of a plan. That's a really great point. Let's jump into the time zones, the acquisition time zones. Where does this fit in the overall cycle? Well, of course, this is proposal, so it's going to be in the acquisition time zones. And if you're not familiar with those are episode number 3. This starts in the market research zone, which is before the RFP has been dropped. Can a kickoff meeting or should a kickoff meeting happen before the RFP actually drops?
It can, especially if you have a good draft RFP when it comes out, which involves, even having like the instructions and the evaluation criteria. There's a lot of work that you can do prior to the final RFP being issued so that you don't have to cram it all into 30 days for writing the proposal. If you can do a lot of the preliminary stuff, that's the time to have your pre-kickoff or your pre-final RFP kickoff and get everybody on board who's going to be participating. It's good to have a pre-kickoff. If you don't have a good solid draft, or if you are just catching this on the gee whiz, they just issued the RFP, let's all get together and figure out if we can do this, then a kickoff meeting is absolutely crucial. And you're going to actually be doing a lot of the stuff that you would have done in the preliminaries, like win themes and SWOT analysis and things like that. You're going to be doing them during your kickoff. It's going to be a much more detailed and lengthy kickoff meeting to get everybody on board, thinking in the same direction with the same strengths and weaknesses and, the same time frames involved. So, everybody is pointed in the right direction.
And you mentioned a couple of things in there like SWOT analysis, and we're going to get to that in a second. That's going to happen, like you just mentioned, during the RFP zone. So yes. The RFP zone is after the RFP drops. So the question is, which one are we in? Well, I would say, like you mentioned, you can do it in the market research zone before the RFP drops, but you definitely should be expecting to do it during the RFP zone. After the RFP drops, that's like we talked about. It's one of the first 4 things you do when the RFP drops.
Yeah. And if you've had the preliminary meetings and you've had the draft RFP, then what you'll be doing during your kickoff after the final RFP is out is you'll be validating or adjusting those win themes, SWOT analysis, expectations, things of that nature. No matter what, you still have to have a kickoff meeting after the final RFP is issued.
Yeah, that's a good point. You may have 2 meetings, but that just the second one will be shorter and more effective.
Yes.
Okay, so now we talk about why to do it, talk about when it happens. Okay, well, let's get into some of the nuts and bolts of what actually happens at a kickoff meeting. Okay, so Vicki, give me an idea of what are the steps that are involved, and we'll even go through like what an agenda looks like.
The kickoff meeting sets expectations. You are able to set expectations for not only what the kickoff meeting is going to look like, but the status updates that will happen through managing the proposal up until delivery of the proposal. And it lays the foundation for the steps and the actual due date and the reviews that are going to happen. It sets all of that tone for how things are going to happen over the next 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days, however long you've got.
It's interesting that we talk about the first 4 steps, right? And the first step, which is really the RFP, and the second step, which is proposal schedule. Those 2 steps, those are kind of situational awareness. You're taking the information the government is giving you and you're organizing it, right? Well, now the second steps, which is the kickoff meeting and the proposal, now it's the actual response to that.
The kickoff meeting is proposal specific. Each kickoff meeting, and I know we've talked about this, what do we expect in the agenda? Well, each one is going to be proposal specific as to, what is going to be in the agenda.
Now we're in the kickoff meeting phase. This is us responding to those first 2 steps of understanding what the government is asking for. So I have a couple of things. What's the first thing that's going to happen at this kickoff meeting?
It can be a couple of things, actually. If it's the first time that the team has ever gotten together, and it does happen, I've had teams like this, then you do a bunch of introductions of people and companies. Sometimes you need to have the companies identify who they are and what do they bring to the table. So you can spend the first half an hour just doing introductions of people and companies.
Okay, so we're going around the room, and all these people are in the room. Who shouldn't be in the room? Who shouldn't be at the kickoff meeting? Do you invite everybody?
If the prime has not established agreements with one or more of the subs by this time, then I recommend strongly that you not have the subcontractor participate. You need the NDAs in place, make sure that everybody's on board, the agreements are in place, and then invite them to the party.
Oh, and that's a good segue because the next idea is that you're going to cover what we call the SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But this is kind of like your last chance as a team to introduce these. And if somebody in the room isn't actually formally on the team yet, that creates a bit of a conflict because like, well, are you in the party or not? So that's a good point. So what kind of stuff do you cover in the SWOT analysis?
In the SWOT analysis, you're going to cover the team strengths, and that's not just the prime, it's all of the subcontractors. Basically, why are you on this team? What do you bring to the table? What are your strengths? Also, what are your weaknesses? Because we need to know if you don't have a particular expertise that normally would fall within your area, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to talk to that? So hopefully this is a validation of the SWOT analysis you've already done prior to the final RFP coming out. You know who your teammates are. You know that they're on the team because you want them for their expertise to be on this team. You can talk about some of the team gaps, if there are any. You'll talk about discriminators, win themes, and you're going to validate what you've already talked about prior to this point. Hopefully, you're not having to do this from scratch. If you haven't had the opportunity to go forward on this, you might do this during the kickoff meeting.
So what happens if what's in the RFP is different than what you expected now that you're doing the SWOT analysis?
I did have one of those. The RFP that came out final was radically different from the RFP that we had, the draft RFPs, multiple that we had been given. And so, sometimes you have to, relook at everything and say, okay, what are we going to do about this and structure it according to what they've now shown as their evaluation criteria and their particular things that they want us to provide.
So one of the things that I remember you going over in some of these kickoff meetings is the proposal schedule. You got that big old grid. And so that's something that we already built as part of step 2 when we were reading through the RFP, building out the overall plan. Why is it so important, again, during the kickoff meeting to review that schedule?
It's so important because everybody on the team that is going to be writing this and reviewing it and has a stake in it really needs to understand the proposal schedule and how we're going to put together a good quality proposal and not be running like mad people at the very end of the day trying to get the proposal done and out the door. That does not make for a really good proposal. It makes for just getting it done. So if everybody it manages the expectations as to when they can expect to see the first review, when is the red team review, and when are we going to put pens down and there's no more reviews going to happen. It's going to be going out the door.
Do you do, I guess, like status meetings, like as a result of the kickoff meeting? How do those work?
Absolutely. And then during the proposal schedule, you have the status meetings already identified. Status meetings are not an option. We expect that everybody will be at the status meetings. And if you're not going to be at the status meeting, that you let me know and we make alternate arrangements for what is the status of your particular piece of the puzzle. It's something I can manage. It's just we need to understand that a status review isn't just a convenience for me. It's actually looking at where are we at on all these different pieces of the proposal.
Meanwhile, what's the government thinking about here, right? So does the government, and this is for I'm going to put on my former contracting officer hat, do I even care that a kickoff meeting has to happen? Well, I didn't know this at the time, but actually I should care. Because as it turns out, as we've talked about in the last few minutes, this is a critical event. I assumed this was happening, and it was a critical event for them. Okay. But I assumed that industry was just getting together and meeting to talk about, okay, who's going to do what? Let's build a plan and off we go. However, as we've talked about, it's got a lot more detail to it. It drives the proposal forward, right? Well, if the RFP is what's driving the proposal forward, which the kickoff meeting is what's driving the proposal forward to get that result of the overall proposal, back this up and say, start the RFP, leads to the kickoff meeting, which leads to a good proposal, which leads to a good outcome for my customer as a contracting officer. And so their ability to dissect, they being industry, ability to dissect my overall RFP and pack it into a really efficient kickoff meeting that leads to a great proposal that I get 30, 45, 60, 100, raising my hand, 180 days. That was a really rough one later, right? It starts with, am I starting this process smoothly? I think of it like you're kicking the snowball over the hill. When you put that RFP out and all of the things that happen from that RFP, and going back to the first four things, right? They're going to read it, they're going to make a schedule. And then this kickoff meeting, that's the first time that industry is saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to respond to that RFP. So that's why the government cares about this, is if you think in terms of how effective is their kickoff meeting going to be based on the RFP that we just put out. And man, I wish I knew that like 20 years ago. I'd have been a much more effective contracting officer.
I've been there, Kevin. I know how that is. So
That's
I
right.
wish I had known some of that too.
Yeah, because you were a contracting officer before you were a proposal manager. So you've seen both sides of this.
Yes, indeed.
So then let's talk about why industry cares. Well, I go back to that concept, the Stephen Covey quote I use a lot on our podcast, is that frustration is a result of misaligned expectations. And this kickoff meeting sets the expectations for the overall proposal. So Vicki, how have you dealt with making sure that you're managing this kickoff meeting so it doesn't lead to frustration for you?
It's not just frustration for me, but for the whole team.
True.
It's a matter of, like you said, managing expectations and setting the expectations. And if you structure it and everybody has a good feeling at the end of the kickoff meeting that they know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, what they're required to do, when they're required to do it, then there's no substitute for a good kickoff meeting. Really, you can have a good proposal schedule. That's great. Everybody can work to it. But if you don't have the kickoff meeting and get everybody to read it together, understand together, and move forward together, then you have frustration.
Did these go smoothly the first time when you introduced this idea to everybody?
It can go pretty smoothly. It can go a little bit longer than smoothly. It depends. If your team is new to each other, new to a proposal management structure where you actually do organize things and move the team forward and try to get it so that you're not scrambling at the last minute to get things done, then it can go very smoothly. I do have one client that I have done kickoff meetings for multiple proposals for, and sometimes we even have multiple proposals going. So we've got concurrent proposals working and stuff. And during the status reviews and the kickoff meeting, I do insist gently that only that proposal gets discussed during that meeting. So if at the end of it, if somebody wants to talk about another proposal, I've actually had one of my guys who knows me says, I know I'm going to break the rules, but can I possibly bring something up after we're done with the kickoff meeting and talk about a different proposal? So yes, he's got the whole team there. He wants to talk about something else, but we make sure that we talk about that proposal during those meetings, the kickoff meeting and the status reviews.
So when you're doing the kickoff meeting and we're trying to iron out as many of the wrinkles as we can, do you find sometimes that you uncover some gems from just learning more about the companies through this process?
Oh yeah. Every so often I'll get a nice surprise and somebody has some expertise that I'm unaware of. I don't know everything. In fact, I often don't know everybody on the team. So it's very informative, not only for me, but it's informative for the whole team to get together and become a team and actually start working as a team. I think that's a huge step forward when you find out that you got on the team, you've got the actual project manager who's actually going to do the the contract if we win. When we win, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that I like to think of the kickoff meeting as the vision for the proposal. Like, where's this thing going? It sounds kind of squishy and foo-foo, but if we ask ourselves, how many companies are successful without a clear vision? It's like we got to have a direction for this thing to go in. And the kickoff meeting is the place for that to happen in a proposal.
Exactly. You are absolutely correct. It is the vision for getting the proposal done and making it look professional and being something that says what we want it to say in a way that is well organized and presentable.
Speaking of organized, let's land the plane before we add too much to this. So for me, the final thing to think about is from the industry perspective. Preparing is easy, right? But we just have to do it. Well, going to a kickoff meeting where people were just winging it, and I've been to a couple of those, it shows later. You got to prepare the time up front to say, where is everybody going? Otherwise, you get 2/3, 1/3, you get 90% through the proposal, and all of a sudden someone says, oh, I thought you were doing that. And then raising my hand because I'm the guy that's pulling an all-nighter to get it done. So that whole vision of who's doing what, you're absolutely right. And on the government side, without a really well thought out framework for the RFP, and we can get these through communication, through draft RFPs, because the goal of the RFP zone is for the government to submit a great RFP to industry and for a great set of clear proposals that you can award off of cleanly and hopefully efficiently and quickly. That's the goal. So that's the best outcome from both sides, is to have a phenomenal kickoff meeting that leads to a great outcome for the customer who gets the thing that's coming out of this contract that we're all competing to win. So did I miss anything you want to make sure people understand about the kickoff meeting?
No, I think we've covered it all. The kickoff really does set the tone and the direction for the whole proposal process. For getting it completed, it sets expectations and how people are going to communicate, and allows us to move the team forward and to work as a team to get the proposal done.
And thanks again, Vicki, for being on our podcast. I love covering this stuff with you. And for those of you who are listening, if you need help with your proposals, Vicki and the Skyway team at skywayacq.com can absolutely help you. In fact, you got your phone in your hand, call 877-884-5280, and we can get somebody to help you specifically with things like your kickoff meeting.
Okay, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us here on the Contracting Officer Podcast. We'll see you next week.